evening. We are continuing in our study of Proverbs, and we are in Proverbs 11, and the whole chapter there, all 31 verses. So let's turn over there, and we'll begin reading. All right, let's see. Mike, would you read the first 15 verses?
First 15, chapter 11 of Proverbs.
Yeah, and then I'll take the last.
Proverbs 11, verse 1. False balance is an abomination to the Lord, but just weight is his delight. When pride comes, then comes dishonor, but with the humble is wisdom. The integrity of the upright will guide them. The crookedness of the treacherous will destroy them. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. The righteousness of the blameless will smooth his way, but the wicked will fall by his own wickedness. The righteousness of the upright will deliver them, but the treacherous will be caught by their own greed. When a wicked man dies, his expectation will perish. The hope of a strong man perishes. The righteous is delivered from trouble, but the wicked takes his place. With his mouth, the godless man destroys his neighbor. Through knowledge, the righteous will be delivered. When all goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices, and when the wicked perish, there is joyful shouting. By the blessing of the upright, the city is exalted, but by the mouth of the wicked is torn down. He who despises his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding keeps silent. He who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy conceals a matter. Where there is no guidance, the people fall, but in abundance of counselors there is victory. He who is guarantor for a stranger will surely suffer for it. He who hates being a guarantor is secure.
A gracious woman retains honor, but ruthless men retain riches. The merciful man does good for his own soul, but he who is cruel troubles his own flesh. The wicked man does deceptive work, but he who sows righteousness will have a sure reward, as righteousness leads to life. So he who pursues evil pursues it to his own death. Those who are of a perverse heart are an abomination to the Lord, but the blameless in their ways are his delight. Though they join forces, the wicked will not go unpunished, but the posterity of the righteous will be delivered. As a ring of gold in a swine's snout, so is a lovely woman who lacks discretion. The desire of the righteous is only good, but the expectation of the wicked is wrath. There is one who scatters, yet increases more, and there is one who withholds more than is right, but it leads to poverty. The generous soul will be made rich, and he who waters will also be watered himself. The people who will curse him who withholds grain, but blessing will be on the head of him who sells it. He who earnestly seeks good finds favor, but the trouble will come to him who seeks evil. He who trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like foliage. He who troubles his own house will inherit the wind, and the fool will be servant to the wise of heart. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he who wins souls is wise. If the righteous will be recompensed on the earth, how much more the ungodly and the sinner? Okay. You know, as you read through the Proverbs, just such short little snippets of wisdom. It's just like gold. I mean, if you just read down through there, and it just puts those thoughts. They just are so succinct and so well put, and they
so often use both the positive and the negative example. Do this, don't do that. So
Yeah.
you see the difference, you see the comparison between good and evil.
Yeah, there's a rhythm to it almost.
It's poetry.
Yeah.
It's poetry.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's so much at once that I stop and go
Right.
back and read it,
Yeah,
over and over, because it's just too much,
That's right.
right.
Because it goes bang, bang, bang from one topic to the next.
Yeah.
You need to stop and meditate on it. Yeah.
That's true. So as we look here, the title of our lesson 8 is More Comparisons Between Good and Evil. And our aim here is to learn the characteristics of the righteous man whom God shall deliver. So as we read through the text there, we have some questions to lead us in our discussion. In teaching honesty in business, what does the writer contrast with a just weight?
False balance.
A false balance, or dishonest scales, or what I have in the New King James. So yeah, and how? I mean, we hope that when we go to the gas pump, that it is actually giving us a gallon.
State auditors have their seals on it, right?
Yeah, there's the state auditor's seal on there, and I have actually witnessed the auditor being there and testing the pumps. And they actually do. They have scales in the back of their truck, and they know how much a gallon of gas is supposed to weigh, and they do their thing. And they also test it for purity. And that's again, when we're being sold something, we want that honesty, and we understand how good it is to deal with honest people, and hopefully that would make us desire to be honest ourselves and deal well with others. So we must be honest, and we must avoid the dishonest scales or the false balance. Number 2, what result goes along with false pride?
Shame.
Yeah, it's a shameful thing. And, what do you see that same way of thinking in the world today? Is it shameful to be prideful?
It usually catches up with the person.
It usually does catch up
It
with
might
the
take a
person.
long time.
Yeah. But there doesn't seem to be any shame around us in the world. When we turn on the television and so on, there seems to be no shame in anything. And there's pride being taken on all accounts. And it's a trap that all of us need to guard against, because we can all fall into that trap as well. So there's some great wisdom there. In the last part of that verse, when pride comes, then comes shame, but with the humble is wisdom. It's a wise thing to be humble. And that's, as much as we talk about it, we can put on a humble act, as and we've seen that. But as Mike said, after a while it catches up with a person eventually. Certainly in the end, on the judgment day, it'll catch up with everybody that didn't get caught up already. But it'll get caught up again with them. But also, it is something that we need to make shameful, and it's something that we need to do more than just act like we're not. But where does true where does pride come from? Where does it come from in a person?
Excessive self-worth.
Yeah, and
It's in contrast to the humble. The pride contrasted with the humble.
Yeah.
It's the
both of those things, I think, reside in the heart. It's what what has been put into your heart, and what you've put into your heart over the years. if you've just constantly been told in your life that you can do no wrong and you're the best thing since sliced bread, then that is going to build you up. And if you don't have anything to ground you, if you don't understand the gravity of Christ having all authority, of who the Lord is and who we are not, then we become prideful. And humility, the same way, is something that comes from the heart. What do we put into it? What really truly comes out of our heart? And that's the thing that'll catch up with people. If we're being false with our humility, it will eventually catch up. Number 3, of what time is it said, riches will profit not?
Day of wrath.
That's what I think. Mm-hmm.
Money won't help you.
What's that?
Your money won't help you in the day of wrath.
Yeah, right. And then what will profit then?
Righteousness.
Righteousness. I had trouble figuring that question out as to what and the next one too. Although the wicked seems to prosper, his expectation and hope will perish at what time?
But when he dies.
Okay. I think that's an acceptable answer. I was looking, a lot of these questions, I'm used to being able to go down through the text and you can find
the words.
You can find the answer. They're like in order.
Look at verse 7.
Yeah, it says, when a wicked man dieth, his expectation shall perish, and the hope of a just man perish.
There you go. Yeah. I think you've cornered it. Because I put on the day of wrath with a question mark, because I didn't feel like that should be a second.
It's like when you die, you're done.
Yeah.
You can't go and say you're sorry for anything. It's over at that point. You just wait for judgment.
Right. Yeah. Yep, that's it. You got it. I'm going to change my answer. All right. So although the wicked seems to prosper, his expectation and hope will perish at death. And what's the largest or most prominent example of this in history? At least in my mind, I think it is. What do you think is the most prominent example of when a person dies? Their wealth isn't going to help them. All the prospering that they did on the earth is for nothing. What's that?
Rockefeller.
Well, that's a good example. I was thinking of the Egyptian pharaohs.
Yeah.
They have buried all that stuff with them.
Any millionaire or anybody that's not sought out what is important or God,
Yeah.
once they die, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we could name anything down through history, any person who put their hope in things. And I find it interesting that if you study the robber barons as they came to be known, and those tycoons of times gone by, as they got older, they started to really get into some philanthropy. They were trying to save themselves, I think. I think they were trying to make up for things that maybe had been done in their younger years, and felt some kind of sense of responsibility to do nice things for people. And that's in and of itself is not bad, but again, as we can see, we can see it throughout history. I mean, all that stuff was still in the pyramids. It didn't help them in the afterlife.
I think about the rich man who died into, Hades, and he just asked for some water to cool his tongue and wanted to warm his family.
Yeah.
And, it's done.
Yeah, right. You had, well, it was in his family. They have the law and the prophets, and the same as he had during his life, and he had the good things. Yeah, and I think, as we think about our lives here today, in this place of comfort that we live in, we live a pretty cushy, comfortable life in this country, and it's very easy for us to get wrapped up in these things, and that's, I think, a huge danger for us. And I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. If I had my choices, I'd want to be right here and have the freedoms that I do. But we have to keep ourselves grounded with such things, and it's difficult. It's difficult with everything around us. As we see, although the wicked seem to prosper, you look around you and you see all the people doing the wrong things, and they prosper seemingly so much. And sometimes that wears away at a person, and many have fallen away over things like that. But our hope is in something that is much deeper and much greater than stuff and money. Although the wicked, did that one. Let's read that one again. Number 5, under what circumstances is it said a city will rejoice?
When it goes well with the righteous.
Yeah, verse 10 there. When it goes well with the righteous. And that's, I really do believe, I know this sounds simplistic, and I know that the world would laugh me out of here. Maybe you will. But I really do believe that if the world would just follow after the precepts of the Lord, if they would just seek righteousness, that all of our problems would go away.
It's interesting to think about that. We're not called, for instance, we're not called to have a Christian government.
Mm-hmm.
We're called to form and to live in the church.
Yeah.
That's not that we shouldn't be concerned with governments, but that wasn't the answer.
Right. And that's I know this sounds odd, maybe, but when you hear about separation of church and state, and I want God back in the schools. I don't.
We're kind of for it, but there's.
Yeah, God needs to be in everyone's heart and in their lives, but I don't really want the perception of who God is left up to just anybody. Right. The church is tasked, and individual Christians are tasked in their personal lives with spreading the gospel through with the scriptures, and so I'm a little bit leery about turning something like that over to another entity that we can't find in the scriptures. There's education is there for a purpose, but
there's some delicate balances there. Thinking about wanting to have godly people in government and godly people in our public education.
And it starts in a much more centralized place in the hearts of every person. Mm. And if the hearts of every person are okay, well, then the school is going to have godliness in it. Because of godly individuals. Not because it was, not because it's part of the curriculum.
Yeah, there wasn't a thou shalt make a public school and thou shalt teach this and that.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I know it sounds kind of weird for the preacher to say, I don't want God in schools. but that's, you got to listen to the entirety of that statement. So righteousness, when it goes well with the righteous, that's when a city will rejoice. And I really do think that that comes back around to the idea of there being a people that follow the Lord, and there is much rejoicing in those cities. When those that were obedient to the gospel in the accounts, in Acts, what happened when the Ethiopian eunuch went away from from being obedient to the gospel. He went away rejoicing. And the same thing happens in, if a city were to turn towards the Lord. Okay, what type of person will despise his neighbor?
Verse 12, one who is devoid of wisdom.
Yeah, it's a wise thing to keep our emotions in check, and why is it that human beings despise others?
They're jealous.
And a lot of times, because
Sometimes it's pride, that we look down on other people.
pride or taking maybe a person is taking control out of a person's life. Yeah, you think of Cain and Abel. It was certainly jealousy there. It was certainly jealousy when it came to that caused him to despise his brother to the point of being able to murder him. And that's it's just not wise to let those things take over. And I think we understand that, but it does us some good to think on it more and more as time goes on.
I don't know what the word behind this, so I'm not speculating here, but use the word despise, and we sometimes see the word hate, and it's maybe a softer word in the original language than the word for hate would include a lot of things that are just
Yeah.
less than straight up hate. So what I'm thinking is that this sets a pretty hard bar for how we should consider others. It's not that I hate that person's guts. Well,
Yeah.
they would certainly be in part despising. But there are lesser things that we can do that are still in the same category.
Yeah.
We should have a high standard for this.
But when we turn on, the news and we hear about all the things going on in the world, it's very easy to fall into the trap of, ooh, I hate that guy. Ooh, I can't stand that person. It's so easy to fall into that trap. But that's just our emotions taking over. And in reality, whether we agree with them or not, we have to realize that person is a dear soul to the Lord, and they need to hear the truth as well. And how are we going to ever institute any change with despising a person? It's just not a wise thing to.
It's a bad way to start a discussion.
What's that?
It's a bad way to start a discussion.
Yeah. I really despise you, but let me tell you about Jesus. You're right. It's just not going to work. All right. So, what shall happen to a person, number 7, what shall happen to one who becomes surety for a stranger?
You will suffer for it.
Yeah. And that's something that we see perhaps many times in our lives. Maybe even through some of the things that are instituted by those in positions of power that cause people to become surety for others in some sort of way. And it does cause suffering. It does cause issues. Now, does that mean that we shouldn't be helpful? And what is it to be surety for somebody?
Guarantee.
Be in debt.
Yeah. So everybody in the world, because you drive a nice car, we need to be surety for others so they can drive nice cars, right? That's not, doesn't quite connect. But when we allow ourselves to be in such a position, we will, as we see, will certainly suffer. And I don't know in your lives. I know of a situation in my family where somebody took on and co-signed for a person to get a car, and lo and behold, that person ended up paying for that car that they had signed for. It was that other person took off, and this person not only had his own car payment, but the car payment of the person that he signed for, and he suffered for that for several years until that was finished.
My version here says, whoever guarantees a stranger's loan will get into trouble, but whoever hates the closing of a deal remains secure.
There you go. Yeah. And you know, how difficult is it in the world today not to get yourself wrapped up in loans, to get yourself wrapped up in sureties and so on. You know, we've created a society that depends on such things, and maybe not so wise. You know, it's again can be difficult to see how the wisdom of the Lord. So sometimes we think, well, if I, you know, if is what did you say there? What did your refresh my memory as to what your
Whoever guarantees a stranger's loan will get into trouble.
okay.
What was the second one?
There was a second part.
But whoever hates the closing of a deal remains secure.
Yeah.
What version is that?
It's God's word.
That sounds.
Interesting. We might be able to we might take that the wrong way.
The that God's Word version sounds sketchy in its title and its name, but she comes up with quite a few things out of there that I think, that's interesting. An interesting
I
rendering.
switch back between the ESV and that one. Sometimes when the wording is just unsure, then I kind of go to that one to see what it says.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, I think that's good wisdom to
First part session was quite quick.
good wisdom to hate the closing of a deal. All right. So, who really profits most when a man is merciful?
His own soul.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's again something that we lose sight of all too often and all too easily in our daily lives, is that it's our soul that is at stake because of our actions. It is our soul that profits when we do things in a godly way, when we seek after the Lord. It's not necessarily something that is going to give us an easier life here on earth, although I do believe that if we seek after righteousness, a lot of the pitfalls and issues of life are smoothed over. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have an easy life. I mean, we can look back through history, and we can even look to other places on this earth where those that are claiming Christ do not have such an easy life just because of that. So, what promise is made regarding one who sows righteousness?
A sure reward.
A sure reward. Let's go over to Galatians 6, 8, and 9 that are listed there in the question. Galatians 6, 8, and 9 says, "For he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, but he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart." And that's something every day we need to tell ourselves: don't lose heart. Don't lose heart.
And continuing in verse 10, so while we have opportunity, let's do good to all people, especially to those who are in the household of faith.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, again, this idea of, going back to being surety for a stranger. I think what we're being taught here is that we should be giving, we should be those that help others, but let's not put it down in a contract. Let's just be helpful to others, and that's something that is. I think there's great wisdom there. So, what is the end result of pursuing evil?
His own death.
Yeah. Now, what do we think of in that word pursue? What is it to pursue something?
Sounds active.
Mm-hmm. You chase after it. I was watching last night I don't know if you want to call it a documentary. It was an account of a person who found the original Dukes of Hazzard car. The first one that was ever jumped. And it was a mess and had trees growing up through it or whatever. But anyway, they were telling about this. And so I guess my mind is primed, because when I see that word pursuit, I think of Roscoe, the sheriff in that show, that was always in hot pursuit. He was chasing, and he wasn't giving up, and he was chasing those guys. And he was really putting a lot of effort into it. And so when we pursue evil, when we put a lot of effort into it, when we chase right up to the tailgate of evil and just try to catch it, and we just do everything we can to keep up with it, we have death in the future.
Always reminded me of just being single-minded about something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, when you can't chase two things at once, can you? Yeah, absolutely. Yep, pursuing evil. And then you get to the word evil. Well, what is evil? How do you know what's evil?
It's God's word.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever is in accordance with the will of the Lord. And in order to do that, you have to know the scriptures. I've told you before about the college professor who made us write it was a philosophy class, and he made us write a paper on the nature of good and evil. And then he told us don't use the Bible to discuss it. And I don't know how you do that. That's I think impossible, because evil, the whole concept of evil, is biblical. I mean, where does it?
There's certain things that the world knows are evil, like killing kids and, breaking different things, but the other things, that's in God's word, but there's other things in God's word that we need to know, that maybe not everybody that doesn't follow it
Yeah.
can define.
And there are things that we see and are accepted in our daily lives, especially as time goes on. I suppose that there's nothing new under the sun. All these things have been accepted since the beginning, in some way or another. But as we go through our lives, we may be involved in something and we don't see the evil in it. But after time of study, after gaining some wisdom from the word of truth, we start to understand, okay, now that thing there could lead me to this, and that could lead me to this, and so therefore I can realize that there's evil involved here. And that's something that we don't often see sometimes until it's too late, especially if you're unprepared. If you're driving down the road, I know we've all driven, but Charles has driven probably more than any of us, and I'm probably second, and in the room. And as we see, as we look down the road ahead of us, if we're not prepared, if we're not actively searching, and if we don't know what we're looking for, as we go down the road, we can find ourselves very quickly into a nasty situation.
I can give you a great example of it. My wife loves to yell at me for every driver that I could say, that guy's going to change lanes, or he's going to get off here, or he's going to do that. Because after 10 years of doing it, you just know the way the car's swerving, if they're going to go left, if they're going to go right. if
Yeah.
the truck has this, that they're taking that exit, or this guy needs to get off there because up ahead, you just see it. It's
Yeah.
the same with in the Bible, right? We should be able to predict certain things. If I start playing the lottery, what am I contributing to? Well, one, that's a form of gambling. And if I hit the lottery, I'm taking money from people who are addicted and have a problem. Is
Mhm.
that okay?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good example. Not seeing, what does it hurt if I give $3 to the gas station and they give me, and I win 500? What possibly could go wrong with that? But when you boil it down, and you're right, you get off on another tangent, but I've been behind people in line at the gas station that I was behind a guy one time and he had a stack of these
It's an
scratch-off
addiction.
tickets.
It's an addiction.
And he cashed them in, and he got like $300 or something out of this stack of tickets. And I'm thinking, wow, that's quite a haul. He put the whole 300 in and added another 200 and bought more tickets. It's like, what are you doing? Stop while you're at least you have something in your pocket. But there's no, like Ed said, having single focus on something. We should have the single focus on the Lord, not gaining things on this earth and not our own desires. Not that, again, God wants us to be happy. He wants us to be those that are comfortable.
It's not even single focused on God. It's that comes with the understanding that there's stipulations there. You're driving the car, but there's 100 lanes of things you need to be aware of, even though you want the destination of heaven. But if you get off the exit to do sin, you ain't making it to heaven.
Right.
So you can have all the focus you want. If you miss
Sometimes
some of those stops.
sometimes there's not a ramp to get back on.
That's true.
What route is that out towards Lodi? You get off, you can't get back on.
Ashland. For a minute, yeah, right before Ashland.
So the next one, I think, paints us a really interesting picture. With what does the writer compare a beautiful woman that is without discretion?
Swine with a jewel in its snout.
Yeah, and that, is I think that as a person grows in wisdom, you start to see this. Some of the things. Just think back to your younger days, and perhaps people that you were enamored with, that you thought really had it all together, and that were perhaps even physically beautiful. And over time, you start to realize that that was just an outward thing, and it's really not something that you should chase after, because in the end, you're stuck with something the gold ring and a swine's snout, that really paints a picture in your mind, and it's not a pretty one. It's not one that would be desirable. It's a waste almost. You think of, it's a waste of the gold ring.
I'll give you one of the biggest ones in my life, and it's true of a lot of people. As a kid, you look up to your parents. As an adult, you look at some mistakes that they have done or things that they continue to do, and it's upsetting. So I come from a family of non-believers, and I come from a family that is almost opposite in some of those things. And so now, as an adult, because I want to be faithful, they've turned away.
Mm-hmm.
And this would happen in lots of places. But it's hard because you look up to your parents growing up. They're the ones that fed you and kept you alive. But they were pushing you in the wrong direction. If you look at foreign countries and religions around the world, that'll get you killed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard, but that is the truth. It's sometimes you have to leave mom and dad and say, I can be part of you no more because you don't seek the Lord.
Yeah. Now we're told in the scriptures that unless we are willing to leave father and mother, you know, and leave behind those alliances, those relationships. What assurance is given unto the liberal, one who gives freely and fully, the liberal soul? One who gives a lot, who is very giving. What will they?
Prosper.
Yeah, they'll be made rich. And this is, of course, in spiritual blessings.
I see a lot of people are going to read that wrong.
Right. And, you know, and if you stop right there,
Yep.
you know, then you're in the same place as those guys that say, now hold your prayer cloth up to the television screen and send me $5,000, and you'll get more money. You know, next week you'll get a check for $10,000. And it's, you know, all of that stuff. Again, you have to follow the entirety of the scriptures, and that's where you know, your hackles go up when someone says something like that, when someone's trying to preach the prosperity gospel. Your hackles go up because you know better, because you've studied, because you understand the true nature of God's blessings.
I would almost go as far as and make the argument of any other word but spiritual gain would ultimately be a sin. Any other form that you could gain that isn't spiritual in this example, I think would ultimately be a sin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we're never promised, you know, financial gain. Now, I know that, you know, the Lord desires to take care of us, and if we are workers for Him, and if we are not afraid to get out and do to work, you know, if a man does not work, neither shall he eat. Told Adam, you know, that you're gonna now work for your sustenance when he put him out of the garden. And you know, if we are willing to do those things, and we are willing to keep our eyes focused on the Lord, I think that the Lord's going to take care of us. And again, I think I mentioned it on Sunday. It might not be in the newest, shiniest car. It might not be in the biggest, fanciest house, but you're going to be okay. And ultimately, if your life ends, if the physical life ends for some reason, you know, people's lives are cut short every day in car crashes and because of illness and whatnot. But if their focus is on the Lord, got nothing to worry about. You're going to receive an inheritance that is greater than anything you can ever imagine on this earth.
Right place, right time.
What reward will one receive who seeks mischief?
Trouble.
Okay, I got the right one. I was, that's another one that I was like, I don't know if that's the one. What will happen unto one who trusts in his riches?
He will fall.
Yeah, again, looking back to, you know, all the people that we mentioned earlier and the Egyptians and how they still died. They didn't come back. Their bones are still in the sarcophagus. What does the writer say in regard to one who winneth souls? He's wise. Let's go over to James 5:20 to close out. James 5 and verse 20 says, "Let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save us all from death and cover a multitude of sins." It's a wise thing to save souls, to point out to those around us that, you know what, I see some evil there on your path, and let's look at the scriptures together. Let's see if you can see this, and to help that person come to that understanding. I mean, somebody did that for us. As I look around us today, you know, somebody took the time to share the truth with you.
This doesn't just pertain to sharing the truth. That pertains to brethren, helping other brethren that are
Classes up in
coming off the path.
Yeah.
That helps. Hey, I've noticed on the weekend you've been doing this.
Right.
Let's talk about that.
Turn with me to 1 Corinthians, chapter 15. Now, I had started out to do one invitation, but it turned into this one. But in verse 27, it says, "For he has put all things under his feet." But when he says all things are put under him, it is evident that he who put all things under him is accepted. Now, when all things are made subject to him, then the Son himself will also be subject to him who put all things under him, that God may be all in all. I don't know how many times I have read this, but I never got the idea that God gave all authority to Jesus, with one exception, God himself. I never had that cross my mind until I was going and doing another invitation and ran across this. And also in verse 28, when all is said and done, I can picture in my mind the humbleness of Jesus giving the church to God. And all of us are there in heaven with it. So, just because you may have gone through, and I have, I think, only read through the whole Bible, start to finish, maybe only a few times, but much more than that in the New Testament. But you will always find something that you may have glanced over, that you may have maybe deemed not important, but just, I never thought of it that way. And so I know that all of us here have been obedient to the gospel, and that is a good thing. I don't know how many churches can say that everyone that's in attendance has been obedient to the gospel. But even though we have all been obedient to the gospel, there may be times in our lives where, things may get to the point to where maybe you're just not so sure where to turn. And God's family is right there. We're all ready and willing to help. And that's why God set up the church, so that we can all come together, that we can all help uplift each other and get us all through that next coming week. So think about your soul's condition, and if there's anything that you would like to have the prayers of the congregation, obviously we would be more than glad to do that. So if you need that kind of help, we're here. We ask you to think about that as together we stand and sing.